back to another episode of Off the Grid. You know, a lot of people think if you live off the grid in the woods that you use one of these things, an outhouse, to do your business, a crapper. And the fact is that we have used one of these things. And they work. They're very simple to build. And they're inexpensive. But there's a reason they're called outhouses. They're out. They're away from your house. In warm weather, if you don't take care of them, they can stink. They can attract insects. And if you're not careful, they can pollute your groundwater. So we've moved away from the outhouse and found a couple of other things that work for us. Today we're going to talk about our search for a good crapper. And we're going to begin by talking about composting toilets. So let's get started. Welcome to our bathroom. Actually, this is one of two bathrooms in our cabin, but this is the one that has our composting toilet. And it's right behind this door in here. But I'm not going to show it to you yet, because picking the right composting toilet really depends on where you live and how you live. Now, for us, over the last 20 years of off-grid living, we have used an outhouse. We've used 3 different types of composting toilets. We've had a porta potty and a flush toilet. Today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 3 different types of composting toilets. Then we're going to suggest 6 questions that you should ask before you go out and buy a composting toilet. Then we're going to show you what's behind this door, our little puppy. And we'll tell you why we picked this one for this house. The first type of composting toilet we're going to talk about is called drop down. It drops down from the bathroom into your composter. So the composter is mounted below the floor level, either in a basement, a second room below your bathroom, or actually underneath the house. These units can be rather large. They have a big bio drum where you put in bulking material. The waste drops in from above. You crank it, mix the material up, and the composting process begins. As that drum begins to fill up from continuous use, you can offload some of it into a drying tray where that gets finished. When it's finished, you pull out a drawer, take it out, and put it in your garden and continue the process. That allows you to continue to fill your biodrum while you're drying some of your material. These are wet units. In other words, they have a flush toilet, so they have a little collection plate on the bottom to collect water, which then can be siphoned off into a collection bucket and treated. They all have ventilation to keep air circulating through the unit. As I mentioned, these are wet toilets, which means the toilet you have in your bathroom looks pretty much like the one you'd have at home. The difference is they are 1 pint flush. No more than that. Each time you push a lever, water goes down. Now, the problem we've run into with these toilets is that 1 pint doesn't really take care of all of your business. It doesn't push it all down into your drain. So then you push the lever again and you put more water in until you've emptied your bowl. The problem is that too much water can foul your composting system. It becomes a mess where the compost isn't working. You've got water and liquids all over the place. It begins to stink. You get bugs. You've got to go down and clean it out. So one thing to do with these units is to watch very carefully how much water you're using. Now, these drop-down units, this one is made by Sunmar. It's called the Centrex NE. That means non-electric. The toilet is made by Sealand. If you're interested in either of these things, go check them out on the internet. There's lots more information about how they work. Now, another type of composting toilet is a dry toilet that is self-contained. In other words, the entire unit, including the toilet seat, are all of one piece. You simply mount it in your bathroom. They have a large biodrum. The waste is dropped into the drum. Bulking material is added. You turn the drum, mix the materials, and the composting process begins. As the drum fills, there's a drying tray where you can offload, put material into the tray, and let the composting process complete itself while you add new material to the drum. You can then take this out when it's dry and put it in your garden. These units have a small drain for any liquids, urine that is collected here comes off to a bucket where it can be taken out and treated. They have a small fan to evacuate air. We call this unit the throne because it is big. You have actually a little step up to get up and sit in the throne, but they work very well. One of the units made like this is by Sunmar. It's called an XLNE, non-electric. If you're interested, look it up on the web. A third type of composting toilet is also self-contained. In other words, it fits inside your bathroom. But instead of being a drum type unit where the waste goes into a drum and you rotate it, instead in this kind of a unit it drops into what is basically a bucket. And the bucket has a crank that goes into the inside of the bucket, and when you turn the crank it churns the material and mixes your bulk material with your solid waste and begins the composting process. These units are unique in that the bowl design is set up so that liquids don't go into the bucket. Instead, they're diverted to a collection container, which when it's full you can take out and dump. So this unit stays completely dry. It is vented, air moving through the unit to keep it healthy. No drain. These units are made by Airhead. Check them out on the web if you're interested. 3 different composting systems, and they're all engineered a little bit differently, but they all do the same thing. They're designed to compost our waste. And they have 5 common needs regardless of the model. The first thing they need is a good bulking agent. Something like peat moss or coconut fiber or even sawdust, as long as it's not cedar, to add to the compost the solid waste to make the process work. The second thing you're going to need is air circulation. You need to have air moving through your unit. 2 reasons really. 1, it helps to evaporate any liquids that are accumulating, and number 2, it keeps the bugs out. Now some people think it's for smell, but a good composting unit should never smell. In fact, that's a tip-off that something's not working right. Next thing you need is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Composting stops below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So you need temperatures to stay above 40. Next thing you need is time. Bacteria eats this stuff slowly. If you've ever composted yard waste, you know how long it takes. That's where one of these little drying trays we talked about come in handy. When your drum gets full, you can take some of that waste, offload it, let it dry completely while you continue to use the drum, and then you dump it in your garden. If you don't have a drying tray, and you don't have a unit that has one, you might want to build one if your system begins to get too much material in it and it hasn't composted. The final thing you need is biodegradable toilet paper. That's the last thing that gets chewed up by the bugs. And if you have regular store-bought toilet paper, it's got chemicals in it that are going to slow down or maybe even stop the composting of the toilet paper. So look for some biodegradable toilet paper. 6 questions to ask before you go out and buy a composting toilet. Number 1, how much space do you have? Do you have a small bathroom or do you have a large bathroom? How much space do you have underneath your bathroom floor? Do you have a basement or a second room or space underneath your house where you could mount one of those drop-down units? Second question is temperature. Composting stops at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if you keep your composting unit inside the house and your house is heated by a fireplace, your compost is going to stay nice and warm from the house heat, and you'll have a nice healthy system. But if you decide to mount a unit as a drop down underneath your bathroom and that temperature gets below 40 degrees, your composting is going to stop. Which brings us to your third question. How much electricity do you have? If you have plenty of electricity at your home, you can get a little heating unit that fits in the bottom of these composting toilets. They become electric toilets. The little heating rod keeps that temperature in the unit, even in winter, even below the house, above 40 degrees, and you have a healthy composting system. Most of us don't have enough electricity to do that 24/7 and run all the other things we need in an off-grid house. But the minimum you're going to need is a small amount of 12-volt power. That is going to run a small muffin fan that you're going to put inside any one of these units in their ventilating system. You need to have circulating air. It can't be passive. Now what you can do is get a small solar panel, find a used deep cycle battery, hook the two up, and let it run your little muffin fan. It'll go on forever. Next question is, do you want a flush toilet? Now we talked about flush toilets and the water they put into the system and that it has to drain out. If you get too much water in there, you foul your system and the composting stops. So you're going to have to carefully manage how much water goes in. Second thing is you're going to have to watch the type of bulking material you'll use. If it's very fine and you're using a drum composter that had a screen on the bottom so the liquids can drain out, some of those fine amounts of peat moss are going to go through that screen too, and they could clog up your drain system for the water. If it happens, you have a real mess. Next question, how many people are you going to be using your composting toilet? 2 people, you can get away with a small unit. Family of 4 or 6, you're going to need one of those big Centrex units, or you're going to need more than one composting toilet. Final question, how often are you going to use this toilet? What I mean by that is, are you going to be using this composter on weekends only and then going back to another home in the city during the week and then come back? Or are you going to be living in your house 24/7? Now, if you're going to be just weekend use, your composting will begin and might even complete itself by the time you come back. You'll have a nice finished product. You can take it out and put it in your garden. But if you're using this unit 24/7, you may not complete the composting process. I mean, think about it. If you have a garden and you're composting leaves and mulching garden waste, you know it takes months for that process to complete before you have mulch that you can put in your garden. The same thing is true with a composting toilet. If it doesn't have time to digest everything, you're going to have unfinished material. Now, that's where one of those trays comes in handy, where if your drum gets full, you can dump some of it into a drying tray, and the process will finish while you continue to use your composter. If you don't have a finishing tray, you're using a different kind of a unit, you may want to think about building an intermediate treatment system that you can dump your buckets into and let it dry and then put it in your garden. Okay, that's composting toilets. Now, I'll show you what we have. We ended up picking the Airhead. We liked it for its design, for its large capacity, and its size. Now, as you can see, it looks like a regular toilet. The 2 holes in the bowl collect the urine, and solids drop down through that trap door. A large coffee filter catches the solids trap door and keeps the bowl clean. We add coconut fiber as a bulking agent. 1 brick sort of starts the process, and it lasts us about a month. And we crank the handle after every use. That churns up the mix and keeps the compost process going. The urine collector detaches from the toilet. We just treat it with a little chlorine and dump it in the woods. Now, the Airhead has 2 sections, the bowl and the bucket. The top detaches, allowing us to add bulking material or to empty the contents when we need to. The whole process is pretty efficient, but we found that with constant use, we never get the compost completely finished. So we built a fine mesh drum that handles the final drying process. After a couple of weeks, it's just dry dirt. That's it. I hope it was helpful. Send us your questions, and thanks for joining us.